Welcome to our webcast, 5 options to address your Sybase ASE uncertainty. I'm Larry Goldman, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Spinnaker Support and the moderator for today's webcast. Our agenda for today is here. Okay, we're going to start with some introductions, and then we're going to cover 3 topic areas. Where is Sybase today? What are some of the challenges specifically facing Sybase customers? And then we're going to talk about what can you do? What are some options? We're going to cover 5 of them for your product strategy in the near future. We'll finish up with hopefully 5 or 10 minutes of Q&A at the end. The webinar should run about 40 or 45 minutes, and you'll be on mute as an attendee throughout the webcast, but we encourage you to ask questions. If you can use the GoToWebinar dialog box, you'll see something marked questions. You can put a question in there and then just send. You can also, if you have another question about the webcast itself, certainly you can use the chat box as well. We will be sending out the slides following the webcast, so you'll be receiving those. And we'll also try and get to as many questions as we can. Our speaker today is Peter Dobler, the Vice President of Data Engineering at Spinnaker Support. He's also the former founder and CEO of Dobler Consulting, which was acquired by Spinnaker Support in September of 2021. If you've ever been involved with Sybase or the Sybase community at all in the past 2 decades, then you're more than likely to have either met Peter, spoken with him, worked with him, or heard him present at any number of conferences and forums. As you can see here from Peter's CV, there are very likely few individuals in the world who know Sybase better or have invested as much of their careers in the product line for as long as Peter Dobler. And with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker today. Welcome, Peter. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Larry, and welcome everybody to the webcast today. What we want to do throughout the webcast is also kind of get a little bit of an idea what you're doing and what your thoughts are. So we sprinkle some polls throughout the presentation, and before we jump into the beginning of the presentation, let's start off with the first poll. Larry, please, can you present the first poll? So here, yes, it's here. So yeah, let us know which you're using, and if you're using all of them, please, then that's great too. It will give us a few pointers on what you're doing, and I believe we will see a live view of it or not. Are you good, Larry? Can we continue?
Yeah, okay, here, let me close it.
All right.
I will share the results here very quickly.
There we go. Perfect. So it's a lot of ASE, rep server, and some IQ. Great, excellent, thank you. All right.
Peter, there has already been a question about SQL Anywhere, so we'll get to that later.
All right, we'll get to that later, yes. Before we start with the options and what the main theme of the presentation is, I kind of want to take us back in history to really understand why are we here? Why are we actually talking about that? And you might heard me talking a lot of upbeat messages from Sybase, SAP, and I really tried over the past, I would say, over the past 10, 12 years to be upbeat and kind of be the cheerleader on all these things, but in the reality, things are not that great. And we have to face this, so that things are not that great. So starting with 2010, we all know Sybase, SAP acquired Sybase, and then there was a series of great hope, right? In 2011, this message came out. SAP wanted to be #2 database vendor by 2015. Well, didn't really pan out that way. Actually, it went the opposite way. There's many reasons for that. We can start finger pointing, we can do all that kind of things, but that was just the reality. But the one thing good that happened in 2012 was essentially SAP ported Sybase to be compatible with the SAP ERP, which in theory should be opening up the client base. To this day, I think they made a tactical mistake by naming it 15.7 and not 16. There was too many SPs and EBFs packed into this release. They should have been released 16, but however, couple of years later, 2014, in Atlanta, we made the announcement of the GA of ASE 16. Was a great event. I don't know how many of you were there. Maybe we can do a little hand wave on all the people who attended Techwave 2014 in Atlanta. At that point, the International Sybase User Group organized the whole thing. I was on the committee there. It was a great event. Maybe about 300-400 people in total attended, which was not too bad. Lots of great sessions. And then it got dark, right? After 2014, there was nothing happening. So 2019 was probably the darkest day for all the ex-Sybase people and folks that are with Sybase or supported Sybase, used Sybase, were close to the people when pretty much all of the North American engineering teams got laid off. That included Richard Pledereder, who was the main guy on the ASE engineering team. The only teams that survived was the SQL Anywhere team. Everything else got pretty much shut down. I was promised, or I heard that there was a plan on hiring 4,000 engineers over in Europe, or actually 10,000. 4,000 got laid off. 10,000 should be hired. I guess we're still waiting for this 10,000 people getting hired. And then right around when the pandemic started to kick in, we saw some key personnel leaving SAP. One we forgot about, not on the list here, Jeff Tallman was the first one. Pretty much everybody who had anything to do with Sybase and had Sybase support answering them knows who's Jeff Tallman. Then Peter Thawley, who was the dinosaur in Sybase and SAP for Sybase, left, went to AWS, and shortly thereafter, Rob Rashore left as well and went to AWS. So the pillars of the Sybase engineering and support, they left. And in 2021, the only thing that happened then was the ASE Cloud was released. And unfortunately, ASE Cloud is situated on the SAP HANA Cloud, which is also running on top of Azure, just in case you didn't know that. So what is happening in the near future, right? I kind of claim that SAP stopped innovating. Yes, they put out releases. Yes, they put out some features in there, but they were more driven by large client demands that they need something, and not so much by what kind of going out to the market and see what we need to do. It was more of a checklist brought to SAP by their 50 largest clients. But that's not necessarily innovation. That is just a to-do list to implement into a product. So the only thing that truly happened that kind of changed the narrative was when ASE went to the cloud, including IQ and rep server. The most significant thing that happened during this period is that SAP slashed the Sybase portfolio that's available for selling. And this essentially slammed the door on a lot of clients that just simply cannot afford to pay for platform edition. It's just too expensive. And so that was kind of a downer. Same thing for SQL Anywhere. SQL Anywhere is not the easiest license structure out there. There's many different combinations, and SQL Anywhere got pushed into the e-commerce shop, so do it yourself, which created a whole lot of new problems because nobody knows which license to choose from, especially if you already have something you want to add to it. It's just a nightmare. And support has to jump in all the time to sort out the wrong license orders and all that stuff. At the same time, and you all know this, you've seen this, Sybase really, SAP, sorry, really focuses more on HANA than it focused on Sybase. It took 10 years before there was actually a dedicated Sybase website or a page on SAP. It was always kind of combined within everything else, and really, and then you all know the pain what happened when all the closed case database disappeared. That's probably the biggest blunder that happened through the whole time. So nobody had access to closed case information anymore. So the whole knowledge pretty much disappeared, and that was bad. Same thing. Getting license keys, navigating the license to support website from SAP is, let's say, challenging at the least, and that is an issue. If you compare this now to what others do, Oracle, Microsoft, they are releasing new versions, new features, innovating things at breakneck speed, whereas SAP, as I said, it's not really innovating. It's implementing a wish list, and so that's kind of the difference that's happening. So where are we? The current version of ASE has a shelf life, or let's say support, end of support, from December 31st, 2025. Yes, SAP or Sybase will not stop working at that date. You just won't get any more bug fixes or EBFs or anything else. It will still run. If you have a license, it will still run. There is a 16.1 in the pipeline for this year, Q4, that will extend the end of support date to 2030. This was announced a year ago. I haven't heard anything about that. There's no communication. You can still be hopeful that this is going to happen, and essentially throw the lifeline if you have to have support of your current ASE installation. I haven't seen any announcements on new releases, new features, what have you in Rep Server IQ, but I can be mistaken. There may be something out there. It is just not that easy to get to because SAP really does not market these products as they market other things like HANA. And again, the database technology that is behind that has slowed down, kind of caused uncertainty in the client base, which then Sybase has become the so-called legacy system in many organizations. There are still some out there that Sybase is the bread and butter, and the mainstream system, but for many others, it has become legacy and it's being slated for phase out, replacement, what have you. So that is just the situation we're in at the moment. And I'll take questions at the end, so please put it in there. I may not have covered everything in there, so please put some questions or even comments. If you agree, disagree, anything that I just said, please put it in there. I'm more than happy to take it on. Okay, thank you. Larry, I think it's time for another poll here before we continue. There we go. So what I want to know from you is essentially, how are you using Sybase today? What is the status of your Sybase installation? I want to select one of them. I don't want to do it's all of the. What is the most prevailing characterization of your Sybase installation at your current employer or current company? And again, at the end, I will ask Larry to show us the results.
Couple stragglers coming in here.
No problem.
I think we got it. Here we go.
All right. Okay. Not surprising. It's mission critical. Otherwise, it wouldn't be here. So that's great. There are a few legacy in there. All right. I would like to hear more from the people who selected other on this. Okay. Now let's go to the options that I kind of picked 5 of them, and there may be another one. I'm more than happy to listen to an option number 6 if you have it. Send it to me. Put it into a question. Communicate. We'll have a dialogue here with this thing. This is not just this is the one and only truth here. It's the way I see it, and I'm more than happy to listen to other things as well. So first thing is moving to the cloud, right? So SAP HANA Cloud is available. It supports ASE, IQ, and Rep Server. My team actually was beta tester on this whole thing. So very early on, that actually went back to 2019 when it started. We did a whole bunch of testings throughout 2020, and then in spring of last year, it went live with a few limitations on it. That's normal. But the main thing you need to know, it runs on top of Azure. And Azure has a little bit of I have a little of a pet peeve to pick with Azure, is because they do not allow you to have memory-heavy database servers. So you're kind of limited on how much memories per core you can actually get, which then kind of puts you a little bit at odds with the license situation, because if you have a 2-core or 4-core ASE and you're running in 64 or 128 gig RAM, great, no problem. You may not be able to get that from Azure. You will have to go to 8 or to 16, or they do some odd numbers in between, where you get 12s and 15s and 18 core installations. But the more cores, the higher the price, because the cloud is licensed by core, and it will cost you more money. At the time we did the testing, the source database had to be encrypted before you could actually move it up to the cloud, and you also had to upgrade it to 16, I think it was an SP3 at the time, to be eligible to be migrated into the cloud. So if you are not on that version, so you had pretty much an upgrade project at hand before you actually could go to the cloud. The other thing is it's new and untested, so it's still a little bit of a black hole in there to figure out what exactly does it, what does it not do, and how exactly is everything handled in there. So that's option number one. Option number two is, and that's something that you may really consider if most of you guys said it is mission critical. So you may want to really do these things here, and you're invested in the Sybase. So you have to really stay close to the latest version if you want to get the most out of your support. And so upgrading to the latest version really opens up the world. So for example, many of you may face some cross-platform migrations. I'm not talking to another word, I'm talking to OS platforms. You may sit on a Solaris platform, you may sit on an AIX platform, and you really need to go over to the Linux platform. So that is something that at the same time you should consider just upgrading to the latest and greatest, especially if you have a support license. It is built in. You get the version, you get everything in there. You want to be at the latest version to really get every single drop out of your support and what you paid for, right? So that's essentially where you want to be. So the modernizing the platform is definitely something that you need to consider if your application is mission critical. This also applies to mission critical application if you are uncertain what's happening with Sybase. What are you going to do now, right? Your next best option, other than upgrading and betting on SAP to do the right thing, is prepare for alternative, move away from Sybase. Especially if you are not that happy with how everything is going with SAP these days, supporting you, or your uncertainty, where is it actually going in the future. This may be your best bet. There is a huge migration trend from other platforms, including Sybase, going to Postgres. That's great. Postgres is I think right now, when I read all the articles correctly, Postgres is now the #1 public domain or open source database out there. Surpassed MySQL, MariaDB, and all that. And so definitely worthwhile looking at it. But we did a few Postgres migrations from Sybase. It's not as straightforward. There are some pitfalls that you need to be aware of and need to be taken care of, and can derail your migration, can derail your effort to migrate the application and make it actually economical, worthwhile to invest into a migration away from Sybase. Probably the most straightforward migration is going from Sybase to SQL Server. These two databases share some DNA. They were actually one and the same up till 1993, just a little bit of stroll back in history. Microsoft and Sybase had the same database till Microsoft walked away, stole the SQL Server name from Sybase. It used to be Sybase SQL Server, and then Sybase had to come up with something new, and they came up with a Adaptive Server Enterprise, or ASE. So that's how this whole thing came along. And I do not, even SAP is, that's their standard answer is migrate to HANA. I do not recommend migrating to HANA. There's a product out there called A4A that's supposed to make this slam dunk, and it is anything but a slam dunk. So, and it's not widely used. So it's, even though it exists, I would not recommend to migrate from Sybase to HANA. There's no straight way to do that. All right. Moving on to option number 4. You have options to essentially, we don't really invest in Sybase anymore. It's a legacy system. We don't want to do anything in there, and there is really no need to install patches or upgrade to the latest and greatest, and so what have you. If you pay support and are in this option, you're wasting your money. If you if you do nothing with your database, it's really, all you need to do is what we call kind of do some lights on support on this and just keep it running till you don't really need it anymore, right? And then there's the last one. And before I go into this one here, all 4 options that we just walked through, my team, Spinnaker Support, we can help you get to wherever you need to go in all 4 options in there. There's a multitude of things that we can do for you. I'm not going to go into details on that, but all 4 options that I talked about, there's, if you're unsure or if it's just too much work, please talk to us. We can help you out there in that. So the last one here is I call it the do nothing. The do nothing is, yeah, you have Sybase, it runs. I wouldn't be surprised if you're running on 12.5 or on 15, and you're not really paying attention to that. It hasn't been that you develop new applications over and over again. There was no external things like a third-party software package that forced you to upgrade to the next level. So it's really nothing is other than you processing data. There's really nothing else happening there. You do have enough staff to handle anything and everything that comes at you. No future plans on there, and yeah, that just and broke, don't fix it, right? So don't touch it, just let it run, unless you have a catastrophic hardware crash. There's really nothing that would change anything on that, right? So then that's perfectly fine. I'm perfectly okay with this situation. And what I ask you is, please revisit the 5 options, and I'm more than happy to go back here real quick and go one more time through it. So we have the move to the cloud option. We have the modernizing the platform, aka upgrade to the latest ASE or IQ or rep server version that's out there. Migrate away from Sybase. Option number 4, lights on support, and then the last one is the do nothing, right? So these are the options that you can pick from. I would love to hear maybe an option number 6 that somebody could come up with and let me know. I'm more than happy to listen to that. But I think now it's time for another poll, Larry. Can you please bring it up? So what we like to know is what is your greatest concern when it comes to Sybase? your current installation or anything. And I want to know, I want to hear the greatest, not which ones, which is really the one that really nags on you. So if you can kind of make a quick decision there, that would be great. And I'll let Larry tell me when it's all done so we can take a look.
Still coming in a couple of them here. It's interesting.
All right.
It builds some suspense here. I think people are giving this a good think. All right, looks like pretty much everyone has, or at least the numbers have stopped changing. So I'm going to close, and here are the results.
All right. Okay, so as I suspected, the SAP support in the future, like always, SAP is very cagey about putting out any commitments when it comes to Sybase. Nothing new there. The product roadmap, that's more on your side, so on the attendee side. So I get that. It depends on where you're going in your organization, what the future of Sybase will be, and what's going to happen. I'm surprised that there doesn't seem to be a difficulty in finding Sybase resources, and everybody's very confident that they could upgrade to the latest version. That one surprised me too, but it's okay. That's great. Or that they should upgrade to the latest. Hopefully, everybody is on the latest and greatest. That's my take. All right. Thanks, Larry.
Okay.
Now I will let Larry talk a little bit to this slide. That's Larry.
Thanks.
Take us away here.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. You covered 5 very different options for Sybase customers. And the good news for the attendees is that they have these options, but also that they're not alone. As you mentioned earlier, with the acquisition of Dobler Consulting, Spinnaker Support's now a full service provider of Sybase, ASE, IQ, and more. And you know, the Dobler name, I know, has been the recognition of the team that you've brought over is quite high. The quality of the DBAs and the years of experience that we've brought over really brings us to that, what I just said, that full service piece. We cover the full spectrum of needs, whether that's consulting, the managed services, or third-party support. You know, options 1, 2, and 3 that you talked about, that again was moving to the cloud, helping to upgrade and modernize, or then migrating to something else like maybe PostgreSQL. Those are all things that we cover in our consulting. Option 4, you talked about lights on. That could be both the third-party support, which is essentially just replacing SAP support with Spinnaker support, or it could also be the managed services that we provide. Spinnaker services are about half, our support's about half the cost of SAP support, and they do feature the live Sybase DBAs that have decades of experience. So people call in and they're immediately, or email in, they're immediately talking with Sybase, senior Sybase DBAs. They respond really quickly, and they cover a wider range of issues than SAP will. As for the Spectrum DB managed services, now these take over some or all of your Sybase tasks on an ongoing basis. And this adds skills and resources, even though some people said maybe we had, we saw around 6% there, that they don't think they're going to get resources. But this is a great way to add the skill set back into your team or add additional skills, and then can keep your databases tuned, healthy, and secure. Under the consulting, of course, there's always emergency services. Something should happen. We're glad to step in, and there's always health checks and performance tuning that we can do as well. As for option 5, the do nothing, well, obviously none of this covers that, but we're always here, as Peter said, we're always interested in talking when you do begin to consider options 1 through 4. So having said that, we've got quite a few questions. I'm really pleased. If you missed the very beginning, we said use the questions dialog box for that you can see there. and just hit send, and they pop in front of us. And I'm just going to start and begin to ask Peter some of the questions that you wanted to know throughout. But keep adding them. And if we don't get to everyone's questions, we will respond via email because we have your information. So we'll start a dialogue that way. Perhaps there's something even more that Peter can answer once you start talking. So first question for you, Peter. We actually had two people ask about SQL Anywhere, sort of just a general, can you talk about it? Some comments you might have on it or insights?
SQL Anywhere is actually in a little bit of a better situation than Sybase itself, because SQL Anywhere has a different client base, and SQL Anywhere is, for the most part, like an OEM distribution. There is still a North American development team available to cover SQL Anywhere. There is new versions available. There is a new version out there. SQL Anywhere took a much different route inside SAP than Sybase IQ and Rep Server did. It is not competing against HANA. It's not considered a threat to HANA, even though SQL Anywhere has probably more deployments in the world than all the other databases of SAP combined. But that's just the nature of the database, and so I'm not that pessimistic in an outlook for SQL Anywhere that I am on the Sybase IQ and Rep Server side. So that's kind of somewhat of a good news. Bad news is that I think SAP did the wrong move by moving the license into the e-commerce online store because it's too complicated. We did a lot of Sybase or SQL Anywhere licenses in the past 2 years before the acquisition, and it was difficult for my team knew the license model of SQL Anywhere inside out. So I can just imagine if clients going to the online store and just, oh my God, what do I have? But yeah, SQL Anywhere is not as in a bad shape than the rest of it. Let's put it this way.
Here's a question from Frank. What is the current status? You kind of touched on this a little bit, but what's the current status of Sybase support for 15.7 and 16 in terms of critical and security patches?
15.7, I believe, just crossed the end of life support. I believe in 2020 was the end of life, either 2020 yes. or 19. That was 2020, right? So what this means is you will not get any more security patches. What you will get is, if it's absolutely really something that will affect everything, then you may get something. I think, and don't quote me on this one because I don't speak for SAP sales. There used to be something that you can purchase, which is called a SAP or Sybase license extension. But please do not quote me. I do not speak for SAP sales. It's something that you need to find out yourself. But if it's critical for you, I would contact SAP and figure out what they can do.
Peter, as long as I have a question, actually, as long as we're talking about different versions, what happens if in Q4 they don't release version 16.1?
Well, nothing changes as of today. Today, we face 12/31/2025 as end of life support for ASE and Rep Server. That is just a fact. If 16.1 does not come out, nothing changes, right? So it's up to you to figure out how much faith you have into SAP to actually make this happen. Second of it is, I do know several clients that essentially say, okay, I need 3 years to get off of Sybase if I don't get support anymore, and we need to have support. We cannot run without support. So the clock is ticking. So now you're in the situation of say, okay, if it takes 3 years and I need to be off Sybase by the time the support runs out on something else that's actually supported, well, planning starts now. So if you have faith into SAP that they come out and give you more runway till 2030, that's great. But at the same time, I don't know if I would do it. Let's put it this way.
Okay. A couple of cloud questions. It runs in Azure right now. Will it run in AWS?
There was a ASE version available on AWS probably about 3 years ago. You could actually check it out. You can build an AWS server and get an ASE subscription. It was short-lived and got removed because it was done without the explicit blessing of SAP. It was just put out there by the engineering team, and people took advantage of it. And it would have been a great success, but that's not the route they wanted to go. They wanted to have control over it. They wanted to create something similar to Azure SQL, where they do all the patching and creating the databases and doing the backups and all that stuff, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but it just doesn't feel right the way it's set up. It takes away all of your things. So think about it. You ran Sybase ASE on-prem with I don't know how many trace flags enabled because of what happened in your database. Well, you want to go to the cloud. Yeah, you don't have control of trace flags anymore, right? They're gone. So what do you do now? Your application, your database may not be migratable to the cloud. There is an option to say, hey, okay, forget about that. I could just get a virtual server on the AWS and I am just running the whole thing myself and move it to the cloud. If you signed an SAP EULA, you're fine. That's no problem. If you are still on Sybase paper, you are out of luck because your license is not cloud enabled, which means you have to shelf out more money. There is a cloud option for that you can get, but it's not free. You can't just move, you have to upgrade. So you have to spend more money to move your software that you bought on the on-prem server into the cloud.
All right. You know, with that, Peter, I think we're right up at our time here. There are a number of other questions. I thank you, everyone, for submitting them, and we'll be addressing these questions back to you via email or some other connection. We're always glad to answer them. I see some moderately detailed ones that I think we'll be glad to kind of dig in and see how we can help. With that said, Peter, I just want to thank you again for sharing your time and your experience. I want to thank our attendees for being here and interacting with the polls as well as asking these great questions. And that concludes our webcast. So I just want to wish everybody an excellent day. Thanks for attending.